Let me get a couple things out of the way up front before I begin. This was a talk that I primarily prepared for patient audiences, but certainly with the encouragement of my oncologist friends here at ECOG-ACRIN. And since oncologists are the other half of this relationship, I think what I have to say today, whether you're an oncologist or otherwise involved in direct patient care, will be relevant to you. And I'll try to provide some road signs as I cover my slides to see where I think you can find this to be relevant to what you do. And also, after sitting through days of data-rich presentations, I assure you there's almost no numbers, there's no graphs in these presentations, so you can really lower your expectations. It's a good thing to have before we have some drinks. And I know some of you are probably quietly applauding that in your head. I only started speaking about this topic in December, and I continue to receive contributions from doctors, from patients, so it is a crowdsourced topic. In our community, I continue to receive contributions. I have my email address at the end of the presentation, so as I'm going through the slides today, think about what your contributions could be, what worked, what was missing, and what you'd like to see in the future. So with that, let me talk about the patient-oncologist relationship. And I'm going to use oncologist. You can fill in whatever name you want in there. They are high-trust relationships, without any doubt. I don't think anyone would argue that they have to be high-trust relationships. And if you were going to put them into a chart, which I didn't do, I think you'd find them in the high-trust quadrant, right? Probably there along with your friends, loved ones, family, maybe the person who cuts your hair. But you'll find that, I feel, that oncologist relationship really is uniquely complex. Let me talk about why I think it makes it complex. How does it start? It starts with the most frightening diagnosis that you can hear. You have cancer. Those who have heard those words will always remember those words and the trauma that is. They're frightening. It's difficult to accept that. You can begin to accept it, and then you begin to unaccept it as you move forward. So that is the basis of that relationship. Secondly, there we go. We, as patients, are asked to make hundreds of decisions throughout the time of our care. And we make those decisions with so much uncertainty. I always tell new patients that I didn't think I would earn a PhD in decision making, but I feel like I have. Third, we're asked to take treatments that are potentially toxic to us now and maybe for the rest of our lives. And we're asked to take those treatments with no guarantees of improvement. These are crazy relationships, right? As a patient, we endure the high cost of treatment and care. That's financial costs, that's time costs. And there's a credential imbalance. Our patients generally have a lot less knowledge, and they don't have the credentials that our doctors do. And that could create some awkwardness, particularly when you think about communication, and I'll come back to that point. And for metastatic patients like myself, these relationships are iterative. With every inflection point, with every change of treatment, I'm coming back to my oncologist, and we're revisiting that in some really tough times. So, is it any wonder that these relationships don't collapse? Look at how these are constructed. Think about it compared to the person who cuts your hair. But I think it's a testimony to the good behaviors and the good actions and the good intentions of patients and doctors that they really don't collapse under this weight. And I have news for you, probably not news for the people in this room. Those relationships are getting more complex. And why are they getting more complex? Well, you've often heard this term called the survivor tsunami. There are 18 million people living with cancer in this country in 2025. That number is expected to grow to 26 million by 2040. So why is those relationships getting more complex? Or they're lasting longer. Perhaps if we peeled the envelope back 10, 15, 20 years, those oncologist-patient relationships didn't last that long. There's a reason for that. Patients often succumb to their disease quite early. I'll give you an example. My father, from diagnosis to death, was 3 months. So that relationship we didn't have to survive all those uniquely complex things when the relationships didn't last that long. When I talk to patients and doctors, the one universal thing they said is for these relationships to work, for them to stay positive, for them to stay strong through those good times and those bad times, the doctor and the patient have to have mutual trust. And the analogy I think of is sort of like a deposit account. You keep adding to that deposit account. You make things, you make additions, and that balance grows. And then sometimes you have to make withdrawals are thrust upon you. You have a bump in the road, a little problem in the relationship, and you subtract from that. But if you have enough of a balance, it can withstand that. And let me talk about the things that patients told me that allows them to trust their doctor. So, for the people involved in direct patient care in this room, I think you should think about this as this is what patients told me that they use to decide if they can trust this person that came in the exam room, this person who's writing a note on the portal, or this person who's calling them. So these are all the things that they said caused them to trust that doctor. First of all, they need to have confidence in the disease. And that they saw as the signal was, is my doctor current on the state of my disease and the state of treatments for my disease? Secondly, an oncologist that comes into the room with plans, options, and plans. You don't have every appointment that you have to go through that, but when there's an inflection point, perhaps a bad scan, or you need to think about changing treatments, you want your doctor, and you have trust in your doctor that comes into the room with options and plans. What else did they say? Well, for those patients, and not all patients want to have shared decision-making, but I believe that a great number do, they want to have a doctor that's open to that. They don't want a doctor that comes in and dictates what's to be done. They want to be a partner, and they want to have a doctor and trust a doctor that feels open to that and treats the patient as a partner in their decision-making. They want a partner that is interested, they want a doctor that's interested in that long-term relationship. They want that relationship to be long. They want the doctor to put the extra work involved in having a long-term relationship. If a relationship is transactional and short, it doesn't take that much work. But these are long-term relationships. We want to see our doctor put that extra work into that. We want an oncologist that is accessible to us. We don't want an oncologist we have their cell number. We don't want them 24/7 access. But sometimes we have really critical times. We have urgent needs. We have a tremendous state of confusion. We want to know that we can reach out to that doctor. There's the means to reach out to that doctor, and that doctor is going to be responsive to us. When that confusion and urgency is met by silence, it violates that trust that we want to have. Now, we're cancer patients, but we're not only cancer patients. As I talked about, we have a lot of suffering, emotional suffering, psychological suffering, physical suffering. We want our doctors to recognize that, to not only think of us as a cancer patient that needs to be treated, but someone that actually may be going through things beyond the own disease, maybe because of the disease, but we want to be seen as a whole person. And finally, unfortunately, in the journey of cancer treatment, we get bad news now and then. We want a doctor that's skilled at that. I heard a horrible story from one of the patients that submitted ideas for this, saying they got to the point in the appointment where they were going to get some bad news, and the doctor left the room and left their assistant to deliver that bad news. You can bet that violated the trust that doctor wanted to have in that relationship. So we want doctors that can deliver bad news, they can deliver it directly and skillfully. So what's the other side of the coin? What actions do doctors do that causes the patient to lose trust? Well, clearly at the top of the list was communication issues. When these happen, we subtract from that trust in that relationship, that deposit account I use. So one thing that patients often cited was the doctor says X, I don't hear X, I think Y, and we never take the time, the doctor doesn't take the time to make sure that we have the same understanding. And if we leave that room and we have two different understandings, you can bet that everything that follows is going to be disjointed. And when we realize it's disjointed, it begins to cause us to think this is not a strong relationship. We know that computers in those exam rooms, we know that our images are on there, we know our lab tests are on there, and we know that you need to look at those computers while you're in the exam room. But patients cited that doctors that only looked at their computer or only looked at their device throughout the appointment and didn't actually engage that patient in eye-to-eye contact caused them to think this is a relationship that I'm questioning the trust about. One only needed to walk around the halls today in the meeting rooms and hear all the jargon that we use in this industry. It's an industry rich with jargon, and that's okay. When you talk to each other, it's absolutely fine because we think that you know you're talking about. But as a patient, I don't understand that jargon. And when my doctor uses a lot of jargon with me, it's like we're talking two different languages. So I can't possibly even have any relationship with you if I don't understand you. Lastly, we know when you walk in to see your doctor, those waiting rooms are full of patients waiting to see the same doctor. Patients report when they're in an exam room and they feel like they're the appointment that stands between the doctor and his or her next appointment. It's a terrible feeling, right? You want to know when you're in that exam room, you want that doctor to treat you like you're the most important thing of their day. What else causes patients to think this is a question of trust in that relationship? This is really related to new patients, but an oncologist walking in the room and not knowing my history as a new patient. That's a really difficult one to recover from. It's possible, but at the start of that relationship is the doctor doesn't know me and hasn't taken the time to know me. That doesn't feel very good. Talked about this as a patient, as a cancer patient, we go through a lot of suffering in all dimensions, and we want a doctor to be empathetic to that. We know that you treat difficult cases and patients all day long, and maybe it's become a little bit of your routine, of course, we understand that. But when we're in your office, we want to feel like we're empathetic to our situation. We want to know that our doctor thinks about the other aspects to us, besides the cancer, that are part of our life. We talked about the costs of being a cancer patient. Financial time are leading ones. We want our oncologists to remember that. Again, you are involved in patient care and may stop thinking about it at some point, but we know when we come in the room with you, we want that doctor to remember that and to remember it is costly to have good medical care in this country. And when you come in the room, we want plans and options, right? Well, we want to give it a rationale. We don't want you to come in with those plans and options and just say, I want you to do this because I'm the doctor, right? We want to hear the rationale for things. That helps us be a good partner with you and allows us to maybe raise questions about things that may be missing or things we don't understand. So we acknowledge, patients acknowledge, doctors acknowledge, there's some friction, right? To achieve that ideal, perfect relationship and to achieve all the things that add to trust and avoid the things that take away from trust, there's going to be some friction. Things aren't going to be absolutely perfect. The first thing is, if I want a doctor that's current on disease knowledge, that doctor probably is going to have to be active in research. And when they're active in research, it can take away time for direct patient care. So I think doctors need to figure that balance out. What is the right balance between being active in research and continuing to provide the kind of direct patient care that we as patients think is required? We have those full waiting rooms. We know that you have a lot of support people and probably don't have enough support people to get help to do your job. We know your institutions put a lot of requirements on you in terms of patient care. And the demands of that, I call that the clinic operations, can really work against that holistic approach, which takes more time. It takes sometimes a decluttered mind to take a holistic approach to the person sitting in front of you. We understand that, and we hope, I don't have any magic solutions, other than tell you I think patients expect you to be able to put the demands of that clinic operation aside when you're in the room with them. Patients know they withhold important information. Doctors know that patients withhold important information. And if a patient is withholding important information, it's difficult for you to provide the kind of help that we know that you can. So I think when you encounter that, acknowledge it, talk about why it's not right, make the patient feel comfortable with sharing information, and explain all the benefits of sharing information so that they don't hold back the next time. And this is something I thought was interesting. Again, we're going to get bad news. Do the natural human thing when we hear bad news. We switch off. All we hear in a big headline is bad news, bad news. And generally, we will tune out what else is coming after that. And the doctors that patients said they have such a good, trusting relationship with, what do? They follow up with that patient well after the appointment in the days ahead and says, you know, I know that was bad news. Let's go back and revisit that to make sure that you have your questions answered, clarity about what was said, and we have a path forward. So that made some patients feel their doctor was really distinctive in understanding that. So what tips did I give patients for managing a relationship? And these were patients that said, I have a great relationship, and these are the things that I think make my relationship great, the things that, you know, at a pragmatic level exist. So first of all, coming into the room with a prioritized list of concerns. As cancer patients, we have lots of concerns at all times. It isn't realistic to think that you'll get to all your concerns, and the patients feel like if they come into the room with a prioritized list of concerns, they have a much higher probability of getting those concerns addressed in the room. Take notes. Encourage and for doctors in the audience, you know, encourage your patients to adopt these behaviors, because you can say these patients, this input from patients is what allows them to have really positive relationships. So encourage your patients to demonstrate these. So taking notes is an important one. It makes you a better partner. It makes you a more informed partner. In the beginning of my journey, I asked my doctors if I could record our meetings. That was really helpful because there was a lot that was confusing to me and not clear. So it was easy to go back to those recordings and get better clarity. Request pauses. If you've just dumped a lot of information and potentially used a lot of jargon, take a pause in that meeting. Ask your patient, if your patient isn't asking for that pause, show them that taking a pause is okay. Go back and review things that you've just said. We tell patients, they said, I feel the best in my relationship with my doctor when I come in as that whole person. I'm not shy. I share my personal emotions, everything that's going on in my life, as much as not everything, but everything that I think is relevant to my care, into that exam room. And if you have patients that come in and, you know, they are a case, they come in the room and act like just a case, I think it's okay to signal to them that I and you understand they're not just a case, that they're more than that. And patients that report really satisfying relationships often take a friend into an appointment. A friend can take notes, they can be a good sounding board afterwards, they can ask you questions. So don't be afraid to encourage your patients to do that. Those are also all of things that can happen on exam days, for example. What other tips can I have? Well, as a patient, I think we have an obligation to understand what's going on inside of us. What are these emotions? Putting a label on them, thinking about what triggers them, thinking about how we can get help. And if you have patients, and a lot of your institutions offer patients help in that regard. So if you have patients that you feel there's something going on, there's a lot of emotions going on, and likely there is, and it's not being talked about, I think you can help that patient understand the importance of identifying that and labeling that and providing resources for that patient to get help. Also, patients that expressed the most satisfying relationships said that they felt comfortable with their patient voice. It doesn't start out that way. It comes from being active in patient communities. You start to become confident in your treatment. You become a better self-advocate for yourself. And patients that express the most positive relationships said, I think what makes my relationship positive is my ability to self-advocate for myself. So that's an important skill, and if you see patients that are missing that, suggest they join a patient community. A patient community is a great way to get that voice. So we're going to have bumps in the road. What happens, what do we tell patients to do if things aren't really going well? Well, the first thing we do is talk to other patients. That's another advantage of being part of a patient community. I do that all the time. Go back to my patient community and say, this is a situation I faced. Has anyone faced that before? And almost 100% someone has faced it before. So get involved and talk to other patients. Like always, if you really feel emotionally charged about something that didn't go well with that relationship with your oncologist, take a moment to get those emotions to settle. Don't spout off right away. Ask yourself, step back, is it part of a pattern or is it an isolated incident? I think if it's part of a pattern, you may need to deal with it. If it's an isolated incident, you probably let it go. Again, you have all this trust in the relationship, it can withstand a little chink here and there. And if you decide you can't live without, you can't live like it is, you can't have that relationship, it is a pattern, it's not getting better, then ask your doctor if they have the willingness to take the time to talk. As a doctor, I hope that you say yes to those conversations. Or if you detect that something isn't going well in that relationship, I think you should encourage your patient to talk to, signal that you're open to that conversation. And of course, we have to be respectful of time. It's okay to set boundaries on the time, but I think that will go a long way to making that relationship, move forward in a positive way. We have had patients that make changes. They have a doctor that they don't trust has their care, their best care in mind. And so we're not shy about telling a patient if they've gotten to that point, if they feel like it's a pattern, and they've had a chance to talk about it, it's not getting better, feel free to change. There are a lot of oncologists in the world. So final tip, one thing I'd just like to leave you with, remember in that room or every interaction that you have with patients, there's a lot of goodwill. That patient has brought a lot of goodwill into the room. You have brought a lot of goodwill into the room. And at every moment, you should be thinking about how do you build that goodwill. The more goodwill that you build in that relationship, that's the secret to getting through those tough times. It's easy to get through the good times. It's those tough times that are tough that you're going to want that goodwill to be able to survive those tough times. As I said, I'd like to hear from you what worked, what didn't work. You can send contributions to me. There's my email address. Thanks for your time and attention. Thank you.